It was a dark, cold night in Washington. The wind howled through the trees, making eerie sounds. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, casting shadows everywhere. It was the kind of night that made people lock their doors and stay inside. But for one boy, this night would be the scariest of his life. Jack was a 16-year-old boy living in a small town in Washington. He was an average teenager with average problems. His parents were often busy with work, leaving him alone in their big, old house. The house had been in his family for generations, and it was filled with creaks and groans that always seemed to get louder at night. Jack was brave and curious, always looking for adventure. But he also had a weakness. He was scared of the dark. Ever since he was a little boy, he had hated the feeling of not knowing what was around him. This fear had only grown stronger after his older sister, Emily, disappeared 2 years ago. She had gone out one night and never came back. The police never found her, and the mystery of her disappearance haunted Jack. One night, Jack's parents were away on a business trip, leaving him alone in the house. It was a stormy night, and the power went out, plunging the house into darkness. Jack tried to stay calm, but his fear of the dark started to take over. He lit some candles and decided to go to bed early. As he lay in his bed trying to fall asleep, he heard a noise. It sounded like footsteps coming from the attic. Jack's heart started to race. He knew he should stay in his room, but his curiosity got the better of him. He grabbed a flashlight and slowly made his way to the attic. The door to the attic was old and creaky. Jack took a deep breath and opened it. The attic was filled with old furniture and boxes of forgotten belongings. The air was thick with dust, and it was hard to see anything in the dim light of his flashlight. Jack heard the footsteps again, this time closer. He followed the sound, his heart pounding in his chest. He turned a corner and saw a figure standing in the shadows. It was a girl, about his age, with long, dark hair. She looked familiar, but Jack couldn't place her. "Who are you?" Jack asked, his voice shaking. The girl stepped into the light, and Jack's blood ran cold. It was Emily, but she looked different. Her skin was pale, and her eyes were dark and hollow. She looked like a ghost. "Jack," she said, her voice echoing in the darkness. "Help me." Jack was frozen with fear. He didn't understand what was happening. "Emily, is it really you?" he asked. Emily nodded. "I've been trapped here in this house. Something evil is keeping me here. You have to help me." Jack didn't know what to do. He wanted to help his sister, but he was terrified. He took a step back, and the attic door slammed shut behind him. The room grew colder, and Jack could feel a presence around him. "Jack," Emily said, her voice more urgent. "You have to confront it. It's the only way to free me." Jack took a deep breath and nodded. He knew he had to be brave. He had to face his fear of the dark and confront whatever was haunting his house. Jack followed Emily to the corner of the attic, where an old mirror stood. The mirror was covered in dust, and its surface was cracked. Jack could see his reflection, but it was distorted and twisted. "This is it," Emily said. "The mirror is the source of the evil. You have to break it." Jack raised his flashlight and smashed it against the mirror. The glass shattered, and a dark mist filled the room. Jack felt a cold hand on his shoulder and turned to see a shadowy figure standing behind him. It was tall and menacing, with glowing red eyes. Jack's fear threatened to overwhelm him, but he stood his ground. "Leave us alone," he shouted. The shadowy figure let out a chilling laugh. "You cannot get rid of me that easily," it said. "I am a part of this house, and I will always be here." Jack felt a surge of anger. He couldn't let this thing win. He grabbed a piece of the broken mirror and held it up to the shadowy figure. The figure recoiled, its red eyes flickering. "No," it screamed. "You cannot defeat me." But Jack didn't stop. He kept pushing the mirror shard closer to the figure, forcing it back. The figure let out a final, agonizing scream and disappeared into the mist. The room grew silent and the cold air disappeared. Jack turned to Emily, but she was gone. The attic door creaked open and Jack stumbled out, exhausted. He made his way back to his room and collapsed on his bed. The next morning, Jack woke up to find the power had returned. The house was quiet and peaceful. Jack went to the attic, but there was no sign of the broken mirror or the dark mist. It was as if nothing had happened. But Jack knew better. He knew that he had confronted something evil and freed his sister. Or had he? As he looked around the attic one last time, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching him. Jack went back to his normal life, but he was never the same. He knew the house held secrets that he could never fully understand. And sometimes, late at night, he would hear footsteps in the attic and wonder if he had truly defeated the evil, or if it was just waiting for another chance to return.